Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of Silver Lining for Learning. I'm so pleased to have all of you with us. I'm sure our panelists, our participants are also quite pleased to see the huge audience that we have here. There are a couple of things I need to announce before we get rolling and get started. First of all, this is a series that's every Saturday Eastern time at 5:30. So we have interesting guests next week in the schools. Will Richardson, I'll announce that again at the end. I'm co-hosting tonight with Punya Mishra. And Punya, you want to say a few things? Where are you from?
Hi, I'm Punya Mishra. I'm Associate Dean for Scholarship and Innovation at the Teachers College at Arizona State University, and just excited to be a part of this conversation. I'm really looking forward to our guests today and learning more about open educational resources and the important role they can play in this sort of crazy, amazing time that we are living in right now.
Exactly. I'm Kurt Bonk from Indiana University in the Instructional Systems Technology Department and Adjunct School of Informatics. We have three guests tonight, interesting guests who've been all over the world in doing their work, and they'll talk all about that in a few seconds. The Commonwealth of Learning is headquartered in Vancouver, and so they deal with a lot of the former British colonies and countries. And so places like Namibia and Sierra Leone and Pakistan and Singapore and Barbados and Trinidad and Grenada, and the list goes on and on and on, Papua New Guinea, Fiji. And so we'll be, I'm sure, entering into many places and spaces in the course of 1 hour. And they do things at scale, which is critically important for this show, Silver Lining for Learning, because one of the things we're trying to do is rethink teaching and learning models and frameworks and so forth. Our goals are to inspire, and undoubtedly Tony and Francis and Sanjaya will do exactly that. Our goal is also to rethink and reimagine teaching and learning, as I mentioned. But third, it's to provide hope out there for people who are dealing with the ins and outs of this pandemic that's impacting people and impacting education in particular all around the world. The fourth thing that I think is important is we want to expose people to fascinating programs, places, possibilities, and people. And so we'll be doing that tonight with the Commonwealth of Learning. You may not have heard of it, but it's had an impact on scores of people, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And so part of that will be a focus on scale. And partly we're going to focus on how you could be involved, what you could provide to COL, and what you can take away from CALL, the Commonwealth of Learning. And so that's a big task in front of us right now. It's a daunting one. But we have with us Tony Mays, who's going to be talking to us about open schools. And he's worked in, he said, 40 different countries, in particular sub-Saharan Africa. We have Francis Ferreira, who's with us. She was originally from Namibia, and she's been a mayor of a city in that country. But she'll talk about, and she's a senior advisor for women and girls in the Commonwealth of Learning. And so we'll be hearing a lot of critical things today from the two of them. So Tony is, and I forgot to mention, an education specialist for open schooling for the Commonwealth of Learning. Our third guest is someone who I've known since 2008, and right away, he signed a book of his that came out in 2008 and sent it my way, called Understanding Learning Technologies. It's still pretty good. Whoops. He also has authored a bunch of reports that you can get for free, promoting use and contribution of open educational resources, policies, costs, and transformation. If you go to col.org and hit resources, you can download these reports right now. You can download Tony's reports and Francis's reports. They're there, they're up, and you can do that right now. So he's prolific. I mean, Sanjaya is just literally prolific. In 2008, I invited him to a conference, a pre-conference of eLearn in Las Vegas that ended up becoming a special issue of a journal and a book called eLearning in Asia. So he's written a chapter for that. He's written a chapter for my Moocs and Open Education Around the World book, 2015. And most recently, thank you, Sanjaya, Moocs and Open Education in the Global South book in 2020. So I've known him for a long time. I have high respect, and everyone does around the world. He was marking papers at Indira Gandhi National Open University when I first met him. Marking papers means you have 100,000 students every year in the MBA cohort. So he was grading lots of papers. The guy is phenomenal. So Sanjaya, he is now the education specialist at eLearning in Vancouver. He's formerly with UNESCO in Paris. He was formerly with IGNU, as I mentioned, in Delhi. So he's been in the field for 25 years. Sanjay, do you want to give people a sense of what COL stands for so that we can go from the big picture down to specific reports that the three of you are working on?
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to this session. Commonwealth of Learning is an organization, intergovernmental organization established by the Commonwealth heads of governments in 1987 when they met in Vancouver, actually. And they decided that there is a need for an organization which should promote use of technology in education, particularly to improve access to education and quality of education. So since then, COL's mandate is to promote use of appropriate technologies so that learners and teachers in the Commonwealth institutions have access to good quality educational resources. We work in the 54 Commonwealth countries, and most of these are small states. In fact, 32 of them are small states, which is island nations or with less population. In fact, the smallest one is probably having 10,000 population.
Give us a couple examples.
Example like Tuvalu, Kiribati. Many people may not have heard of these places in the Pacific region. Also includes small island states in the Caribbean countries like Belize, St. Lucia, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis. These are small nations which are part of the Commonwealth. And we have big countries like India, Bangladesh, Nigeria, which are considered E9 countries also. And in fact, the largest number of students are coming through these countries. So this is the broader picture where we are working with. And I think to take it forward, I will ask my colleague Tony to add on some specific activities. Tony.
Okay, thank you. Are we going on to the slides, or are we talking off the cuff here?
I think you can go in general about our activities at this stage. We'll show those slides just to give the context later.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you could always share your screen, and that would, if you want to use the slides.
Okay. So, yeah, so I'm working in open schooling, but interestingly, right next to me, I have my colleague who works with lifelong learning for farmers, and we share the same program administrator. So we're starting to say, although we work in two completely different domains with two completely different audiences, we are starting to work out that there are some things that we can do together, similar approaches we can use, similar technologies. My colleague Frances does a lot of work, and she's going to talk about gender neutrality and gender promotion in the work that she does, and all the toolkits that she uses feed into the work that I do in open schooling and that my colleague does in lifelong learning. And then just up the passage from me, I have a colleague who specializes in technical and vocational and skills development. And obviously, if you're working with out of school youth, there comes a point where it is better for them to be working in the technical vocational field, which might lead to employment, than to simply be replicating kind of curriculum that we have for school children. So there are, although we have lots of different portfolios, there are lots of opportunities for those portfolios to cross-pollinate.
So Tony, the person sitting next to you is working on the Moocs for development with the farmers in India and farmers in Africa to get Moocs on the mobile devices on low bandwidth kinds of, I wasn't going to talk about, but briefly, you or Sanjay might mention what that is. People might be interested in that.
The Moocs for Development project that Commonwealth Learning is working with is along with the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur. And we use a technology which is scalable and also uses at low bandwidth. And it's called Mooc. And we have used this to reach to farmers using mobile technologies or low-cost mobile, and we call it Mobi Mooc. So what happens, the learners receive snippets of lessons through audio recordings online through the mobile. So they can learn using local languages. So that's the important part. And most people don't know English. And most Moocs are available in English languages. So this Mobi Mooc platform helps us to reach farmers, gardeners, and people who have no access to internet as such, but they own small mobile device. I would request Francis to talk about some of the large-scale project that we have been doing about reaching to girls. Francis.
Thanks, Sanjaya. Yes, the Commonwealth of Learning is committed to providing equitable access to lifelong learning. And in this regard, there's two priority areas. One is on the development and distribution of OERs, and the other one is on women and girls education. So in 2016, we started a special project called Girls Inspire. And this project is focusing on training girls and women in 6 countries. It's a multi-country project. And since 2016, we have trained to date 82,000 women and girls in life skills, providing them with connections to be able to find employment, or to become self-employed, to be entrepreneurs, to find access to financing. And what we do, we work on 3 levels to scale up this project. The one is the capacity building, which is called expertise, by the way, to build capacity in the first place. In whatever we do, the first step is building capacity in order to ensure that there's sustainability beyond our work in whatever field we are engaged in. And the second focus of this project is to work within the communities, because this specific project has 2 smaller projects. The one is funded by Global Affairs Canada, and the other one by the Department of Foreign Affairs Trade in Australia. And the Canadian funded one focused on ending child marriages, and the Australian funded one focused on reaching the unreached girls. So for us to ensure that the girls become part of this training interventions, we have to go into the communities and work with the communities in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Mozambique, and Tanzania, the project is, to convince the communities and religious and traditional leaders that it is important to educate girls and that they shouldn't just marry them off. And then the third pillar of this project is the girls and women themselves, where we bring them into after we have convinced the communities and get the support. And we provide training using various methodologies. We have bus schools, we have the boat school, we have the radio. That's ways in ensuring that we scale up the project. I think I can stop there, Sanjaya.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving that. That's the kind of breadth of the calls work in terms of from open schooling to higher education, and also in working with farmers and girls. to give a broader picture. Yes.
Is the Mooc kit for farmers, is that free? And is there a place people could find it if it is free?
The Mooc toolkit is an open source software. Anyone can use that to host their own Moocs. But all the courses that we run through the Mooc are also available freely on our institutional repository, so people can make use of the content. But software is also freely available through IIT Kanpur's website.
Yeah,
and also
I actually dropped the URL onto the YouTube chat. I think it's moocfordev.org, and it's got the links to the toolkit. So I just dropped that over there.
Mooc
So,
for development.
Kurt, can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, jump in.
So thank you for sharing the work that you guys are doing. Can we, maybe you can speak a little bit to sort of the efforts currently underway, given this sort of crisis in education that we face? And in particular, given sort of the range of countries and contexts that you are working in. I mean, Sanjay, just the names of the countries that you spoke to, from island nations to, which I don't even know what the population is, but it's in the hundreds of thousands, or maybe in that range, 1 million or something. And then you have, of course, at the other extreme, you have like India and Bangladesh, where, you are in the 1.2 billion range. So what are sort of efforts underway right now out of the Commonwealth of Learning to, on this particular sort of crisis that we are facing today? And what are some interesting things that you're seeing people doing with sort of the tools and stuff that you guys have developed and shared that might be, I think, useful for, I think, our audience and for us and myself as well to know a little bit more about? And I'll let you guys choose whoever wants to speak first and how we want to do it.
Thank you, Punya. I'll go first, and I'll actually we have a plan to talk about different things that all three of us, so that we cover everything, we don't miss about. The crisis has actually come out in a time that it's very significant for COL's work that we have been doing over several years, promoting open distance learning, and particularly e-learning in the current scenario. But we were not getting traction. But now everybody is talking about open distance and online learning. So the first thing we did was to come out with a statement. My colleague Tony was involved in that process, and I was involved in that process. We brought out a statement from COL with 5 basic principles that our partner institutions and governments should look at. So those were issued to the governments, and it was sent with, initially we started with a small curated resources. But now what we did, now we have a huge curated list of resources on our website, taken from almost all known sources, quality assured sources, taking from AECT to World Bank to all institutions in all over the world who have released either content freely, temporarily, or issued guideline for going into open distance remote learning. So those are the 2 immediate steps that were done. The third thing that we did is that we were planning face-to-face workshop. We took that as an opportunity, and we have started an online webinar series on Moocs, Massive Open Online Courses. It was initially planned as a workshop in Malaysia. Now it will be an online webinar starting from 16th of April to the end of May. Kurt will be a speaker in one of those sessions in those programs. Initially in the face-to-face, we would not have been able to get experts, but now we would also get about 6 experts in those webinar sessions to train people. So not only we are addressing the challenges that we were facing in our work, but we are making this open to anyone, and there is huge interest from Africa on those things. The next activity that we have started on, particularly in OER, as Francis mentioned, is COL's biggest strength, because we were the one who started the OER movement even before the term OER was created. We released resources freely in 1999. OER concept started in 2001. So that was a huge thing. With OER Foundation in New Zealand, Now we have started an initiative, hashtag OER for COVID. We launched this initiative last week, and we already have about 700 volunteers on our platform, OER for COVID platform, who are engaged in showing interest to contribute to take forward the sharing of resources activities. We just had the launch webinar. We had about 250 people participating in that webinar. So that shows the kind of engagement happening. And from most of the places, most of the regions where call works, from the Pacific, from the Caribbean, in Africa and Asia, and even we got people from many non-Commonwealth countries, especially from China. People were interested in OER COVID, because OER COVID has been launched not as a call activity, but a global response to this situation. The last one, which is generic, is we have started a partnership which will be launched next week, is an international partnership of distance online learning. As of now, I can tell you, we have 32 institutions, open distance learning institutions, or institutions supporting, which we call dual mode institutions, have agreed to join that platform. And we are going to launch this week this new platform, where we would share everybody's resources, which will be pulled together and will be shared so that people get at one place quality assured courses and programs offered by these institutions through one way. We are getting specific requests, and I would request first Tony to talk about a couple of specific requests from the countries, so that you get this kind of scales and response. And Francis has started a new initiative to help girls in relation to the current activities. So Tony first quickly, and then Francis.
So before Sanjay, before you, we have a question on the side coming in, and also if people are looking for the resources, you might read Punya's blog post on this in Silver Lining for Learning. There are a lot of resources are listed there, and the resources are also at col.org, Commonwealth of Learning, under resources. So the question coming in, Sanjay, is what pedagogical framework are used in your Mooc delivery kinds of things? What do you use information delivery, or more didactic approach, or what would people expect?
So I think part of the concern, I think here, if I can paraphrase the question, has to do with Moocs seem to follow a sort of a one-way transmission sort of a model, rather than a more dialectical approach, which might be better for learning. But again, context vary, things vary. So I want to sort of, I think the question is, how are these structured and what kind of platforms are you using?
As I said, we are using the Mookit platform, which predominantly follows an information delivery, or you can say the XMOOC style of delivery. But we have used different approaches in that. If you look at Mobi Mooc, because it's mostly about engaging developing communities, small group communities, and we also use offline, like we used Mooc with CD delivery during Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone. So that's the kind of an intervention happens. But some of the teacher training programs on Moocs that we are using, we call what we call interactive Moocs platform. This is using the same platform, but the design is more interactive, and it's based around community of inquiry model through the work that we do with Athabasca University. So we use different models depending on the context, but largely to help, our objective is to help people do something post the course. For example, we had a Mooc for gardeners, which in Hindi we used to call Moocs for Mali. Mali is gardener. So the objective there is to help these gardeners actually do gardening, learn gardening and do gardening. And then they get a certificate out of it, not just by completing some tests. So there, we use different approaches on delivery.
So a question is also coming, what have you learned that will impact youth remotely and shift our thinking about learning structures? How you're determining what you call quality. Quality of OER should be easy for Sanjay. He's writing about in chapters in my book on quality, and I could send that to someone. But That's a lot there, Sanjay. I want to also talk about the Athabasca program. They've done a lot for teacher training around the world, but I want Tony to get in before we do that. But Sanjay, you want to briefly address the quality issue that's and the other question about remote learners?
The issue of quality is actually this, the whole OER field. There are different approaches to quality. People think that quality is is the responsibility of the people community. That's one way, and the other way is that no, every institution is responsible for quality assurance. The take that we have taken at CALL is both the approaches. That as institution we ensure quality. We have quality frameworks like for any other courses first, but then we have a set of 34 criteria, and we leave it to the community to decide which one you choose from and how you decide about that thing. So it comes to the platform oriented. If you are developing a platform, you use what are the set of criteria that you want to do, and so on and so forth. So we use a middle path. We are not prescriptive, but we using both those means. Well, I think with that, I would request Tony to give this the activities of especially in Namibia and Nigeria, things that we are doing as far as our response to COVID and request that we have received.
Thank you, Sanjaya. Yes, we have been working for the last couple of years in a number of different countries trying to promote the use of open educational resources. For schooling, one of the things that one quickly learns is that there are a lot of resources that are easily available if you know where to find them. But teachers need a lot of support in being able to find useful resources that they can adapt and map to what is their accredited school curriculum. So in some areas, like in STEM subjects, so the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, there's a lot more overlap between different country curricula. It's much easier to find and curate resources. As you move into the social sciences and the humanities, you get some common themes, and then you start to branch out into things that are very peculiar to that region or to that country. And then, of course, we have lots of different languages. In South Africa, where I used to work, we had 12 official languages. In other parts of Africa, you might find 20 or 30 different languages being used at the schooling level, particularly in early childhood development. Most recently, we've received a request from Namibia, our colleagues there from the ministry, to help them rethink the entire schooling system, to move it more, to make it more flexible, to make more use of e-learning kinds of strategies, not just to respond to the current crisis, but also to create a more resilient system for the future. Because we realize that at any one time, we have learners who are in the system but not learning. We've got learners who have dropped out of the system who need to come back. We've got adults still who are prevented from progressing either in employment or education and training because they haven't got a completed schooling qualification. So there are these diverse needs that we need to be nimble about. So we're working currently on a proposal specifically for Namibia, but we're also working on a proposal in discussion for a whole region. So for the Pacific countries, as Sanjaya has said, there are lots of similar challenges. In the Pacific, you have lots of little islands. In Vanuatu, for example, there are 83 different islands that make up the archipelago, and 65 of those have learners on them. So trying to reach all of those learners with printed study materials and building schools is becoming a very difficult challenge. So we are progressively moving towards digital and online approaches, but again, in those regions, the cost of internet connectivity is very high in comparison with average household salaries and incomes. So you can't immediately move to fully online learning in those kinds of places. So what we're looking at is how can we create ways that we can create access to digital resources and share them, but allow teachers and learners to use them mostly offline. So each country, each region has some similar challenges, and it has some that are peculiar. So that every solution needs to be tailored.
Tony, before we move on to Francis, can you define open schooling for us briefly?
So for open schooling, for the Commonwealth of Learning, it's about overcoming any unnecessary barriers to accessing schooling or schooling equivalent opportunities. So it means it shouldn't matter who you are, where you are, what age you are, what circumstances you find yourself in. You should be able to access different ways of getting a schooling or schooling equivalent qualification that will be recognized in your country. Because it has to be recognized, because in most countries, the education system is very conservative, it is very hierarchical, you can't get into frontline employment, you can't get into further education and training unless you have a registered and accredited qualification.
So perhaps there's a silver lining for learning in this current age, that some of these digital alternatives will be more accepted by the governments in the near future.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, part of the challenge is to try and say, well, at least we know in 4 key areas, the STEM subjects, our curricula are very, very similar. So we could quite easily put together a generic curriculum for those areas and share resources quite easily. So that instead of teachers having to scrabble to find resources, we already have a curated set in one place. The Caribbean has started to move in that direction with the Caribbean Examinations Council as an example.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. So, Kurt,
go ahead.
Before we jump ahead, I think, Francis, I'd love to hear from you around some of the initiatives that you're doing. But I think also one of the big issues, as we, again, looking at the range of contexts that you are working in, is this issue of equity. And I think that the gender imbalance in particularly some of the societies, I just wanted to get your take, not just on what you're specifically doing there, but around this issue of equity, which I think Tony also mentioned, which to me, I mean, I was in this class in Johannesburg just early this week. And that was one of sort of the biggest thing. And somebody said something which I thought was like really insightful. It said, if we truly believe in the right to education for every person, then at some level, it is now becoming a right to access to technology. You know, you spoke of the cost of internet and of tools and so on. So I would love for you to speak about specifically, Francis, the work you're doing with girls, but broadly about, given your experience, about this issue of equity, because I think to me, this is sort of the biggest, this crisis, if it has done anything, has really brought forward the fault lines in our world, in every country. So if you could speak to that, thank you.
Thanks, Punya. Yes, earlier when I spoke about the special projects, there was one other special project that Sanjaya asked me to speak about, but because of time, I dropped it. But there is this publication. In this, we chronicled the work of stakeholders, teachers and policymakers and consultants who worked with us in 2008 to 2012, developing OER. And the main issue within that time that we wanted to address was not only to develop open education resources, but to address the issue of equity. And for that reason, when we developed those 20 subjects, which overlapped with the different curricula in the 6 countries that we worked in the Caribbean and Africa, what we did was to ensure that the materials are in print base, it is online, we use the Moodle platform, but we also made sure that it was accessible to people with disabilities. We had the radio programs, we had the videos that they could use for the television, and we also had it on CD-ROMs at that time. I don't know whether we still use CD-ROMs, but the issue of equity is a big issue for the Commonwealth of Learning. And we work towards ensuring that we've determined what is the needs within that context. And that is the issue of gender. Within this COVID-19 situation, the most vulnerable group are women and girls for various reasons. So within our project, to ensure equity, what we do, and that is why one of the main pillars is working with the community. We discuss with the community, and the community participate in how we do this work. In some instances, we would use the radio. We work in the Maharashtra, in Satara and Maswat, in such places. And we use the radio extensively. We bring in local, like the nurses and such people as resource people. You have to make use, this COVID-19 sort of forces us to go into the communities and find the resources there. Who are these people that can help us? We don't have enough teachers. They may not be qualified teachers, but they are the ones that we can use. So we use the local resources, the local artisans within this project to ensure not only equity, but also to ensure that there is ownership and sustainability beyond this project. Another way of dealing with this whole issue of equity is the Aptus device that the Commonwealth of Learning also has as one of its innovations, where we put in a lot of OER that can be used in an offline situation, where they can then access the learning resources. There is one laptop, and they can access it there, and everybody can sit around, they can look at the lesson, they can listen, and they can explain. So there are these options.
Who's they when you say that?
The group that we are training. So we have the teacher, the local teacher, and all these girls. One of the pictures that Sanjaya has sent you, Kurt, you would see there's a group of young women sitting around a laptop, and there's a gadget that is the Aptus device that I'm talking about. Another way for us in Bangladesh specifically is the boat schools, which is one of our partners, where the boat comes to this village, number one, and they pick up a teacher there. It can be a male or a female, depending on what subject field is being taught. And they travel to the next village and they pick up learners there. They travel until they have enough learners for that specific lesson, but it is organized. It is not just picking up whoever wants to get up. It is organized by the local community leaders. And then they have the lesson in the boat. The boats are solar equipped boats, and they have laptops in it, they have internet in it, and they have sewing machines. They also connect, especially in Bangladesh, where agriculture is a big issue. They connect them also to do on-water duck rearing, fish farming, and also vegetables. They can do that with on the water. So, those are training.
I was just wondering, Sanjay, or Francis, are there any, like last time we saw some great pictures from China. I was just wondering if you have any photographs or images that we could see to get an actual example of what I'm fascinated by this idea of a boat school that goes picking up learners. So I don't know if you have any, that would be wonderful to get like a real example of the kind of work that you guys are doing.
Sanjay, you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll share the screen, and we have several pictures. So when I share the screen, Tony will speak first, and then Francis will speak, and then I will come at the end. I don't have access to share the screen. Punya, can you please?
Let me see, participant.
Just click on my window and give the rights.
Yeah.
Francis, while we're doing that, were there any light bulbs in the past couple of months that have come on and new ideas that are more acceptable now, given, COVID? Are there things that you're thinking about doing in effect in the next couple of months?
Well, one of the things that Sanjaya asked me earlier to speak about is the Commonwealth Wise Women Initiative, where we will be having a platform where we will mentor young women and girls, where we use eminent women leaders that we match we will match with women and with young women in countries. The website will be, the webpage will be launched within the next week or so by our president. And this is for us because we know that it is important that we keep going and encouraging young women to become leaders. But with COVID-19, it is very difficult to have this face-to-face and to bring women there to them. And as Sanjaya has even said, with his online webinars, he can bring more prominent speakers to it. So with this online Commonwealth Women Wise Women platform, we will be able to support many young women to become leaders in their field and to inspire others. That is one of the things. Another thing that happened because of social distancing is the fact that partners really work towards creating workable solutions within the context. Within COVID-19, context is very important. Infrastructure is very important. So we are working with our partners to ensure that whatever we do is relevant within that context. Thank you.
So, Tony, can you start talking to the slides?
Okay, thank you. So this first is a primary school in Zambia. It was set up to look after traditional learners during the day. But after our engagement with them, it now also, after hours, provides an opportunity for children of school-going age to come to classes. It looks after adults, as you can see. It has a second chance opportunity for youth. In the similar kind of what's the best use you can make of your resources, we have investigated and found that there's a very good social return on investing in school education, both for the learners, for the families, and for society. Most of our work is not about investing in infrastructure and building schools. It's about developing capacity among teachers and managers and policymakers to be able to sustain the kind of work after we leave. An example of the kind of thing that becomes possible when people share their curricula and their resources is exemplified by this MBA program from our virtual University of Small States of the Commonwealth, where 11 countries and 11 institutions are now using the same curriculum and the same resources instead of reinventing the wheel 11 times. Collaborations with local partners has come up from what Francis said earlier. And here's an example where we're working in the Pacific with a local professional development for artisans, community provider here, as you can see, in timber construction. So in TVSD, we're working with local industries, with local training partners. And central, although we're moving and talking a lot about digital education and moving online, teachers remain central. So a lot of our work is around capacitating teachers to move into the online space. And as part of that, to be finding, adapting, and sharing open educational resources as a core strategy.
Tony, how are these schools funded? As the question came in on the YouTube channel.
So in most cases, we work with the ministries who nominate teachers, maybe free them some time from other schooling things to come to workshops and develop resources. And we have in the past worked with the ministries to make sure those teachers get internet stipends so that they can do a lot of the development work out of school and outside of school hours.
In Dominica, because of the fact that environmental protection is very important within the context of sustainable development, we are working with the Ministry of Education to develop and also distribute information sharing on climate change and resilience so that we can ensure that they are prepared to deal with climate change. People with disabilities is a very important part when we talk about equity of our work, and therefore we are also working in Mauritius with the Global Rainbow Foundation with staff members and teachers to leverage technologies to ensure that people with disabilities do have access to quality learning resources. This is the example I referred to earlier, where you can see there on the ground, the laptop, and next to it is this little gadget, the Aptus, where they are working. And while the ones behind are sitting with another laptop, they can see exactly the same information. And that is all offline. Sanjaya will talk a bit more about it in the next slides. And this is an example of the boat school, which I have talked about at length already. They have training for young children, they have training for women and girls only, and they also have the libraries where they bring in the students from local schools where they come and find resources because there's no libraries in the villages. This is really our flagship. This one here is our project in Malawi, where we work with the community. You will not hear it now, but there is a little radio program which is translated in the local language. But the interesting thing is this material that they use for the radio program was from print-based materials, OERs, which was repurposed. And now we are using the radio. And this is one of the ways that we can scale up the education during COVID. That was done before COVID, so there's no social distancing in the way they are sitting, but this is definitely a way that we can do that. And in the next slide, you will see how we have been working in India through the L3F, the Lifelong Learning for Farmers, where this is a participatory development of resources. The community members who are trained, they were part of developing the learning resources. As you can see on WhatsApp, 150 for agriculture. On YouTube, there's more than 500 videos, and the content is uploaded on Facebook, and they all participate in learning. And this is a good way of dealing with the COVID crisis because all these materials are already there. Sanjay?
This Aptus device that Francis talked about is a low-cost server. It costs about $150, and you can host huge amount of resources. It also it's a server so that you can connect other devices, mobile and Aptus, mobile, laptop, and other things through local Wi-Fi connection. It creates its own local Wi-Fi, and therefore you can take quality resources, whatever you want to share with students. We use this in remote parts of Pakistan, in Swat province, and students' learning were improved considerably, and teacher satisfaction also improved on that. This came as a real boon when Cyclone Gita hit the Tonga Island, and the whole infrastructure was devastated. Call was the first one to reach with a set of Aptus tools so that the schools could start teaching and learning process. And this is something that we talked about, the Mooc for gardeners. These are some of the real gardeners who actually went through this course in their community and learned and received certification. So these are some of the pictures that we thought we would just bring in to provide the perspective of the range of work that Commonwealth of Learning has been doing.
Thank you. I mean, I can just say that the comments on the YouTube channel speak to how evocative and powerful those photographs were in terms of giving us a sense of the diversity and the range of the kinds of things that that the Commonwealth of Learning is engaged in. But I think also more importantly, I think that struck me was that there is the diversity of solutions as well, right? So it's print, it's radio, it's this little $150 or $100 server, or I mean, to me, that to me is another thing that's like a theme that's emerging in this conversation that we are having. And I think last week with the examples that was shared from China, I mean, I remember this photograph of this guy with this teacher with this chair upside down and his cell phone there, which is now using as a projector. I mean, the sort of local ingenuity combined with sort of a structural framework that supports educators seems to be sort of a theme, which is that, yes, you do need organizational structures, whether it's the government as in China or the Commonwealth of Learning, but it's also driven by the creativity and ingenuity and innovation that's happening sort of at the bottom up. I think that's a really interesting theme that's emerging. So Kurt, I'm just sensitive to the time. We are almost at 3:20.
Yeah.
So
I
I
got
think
one
a few
important
summary
thing.
questions and
Yeah,
then
we have
5 minutes at that, right? So thank you.
Yeah. We have one important thing to discuss we haven't mentioned or you alluded to, and that is the TEL project, for teacher education around the world, professional development of teachers. Because a lot of people who are watching might want to get involved in that. So if you could explain the courses that they could take, what results from that. And we do have a question that Chris Didi put in here. What have you learned about creating learning communities through remote access? You might talk a bit about what a learning community through that TEL program, or Tony and Francis might talk about learning communities a bit. But Sanjaya, can you talk about the Athabasca project and the impact that you're having and what's coming up? What kind of courses could the people watching enroll in?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the biggest challenge currently we are facing is that teachers were not prepared to teach online, and they're expected to teach online. It's a huge stress on the teachers themselves. It's not only stress on the parents handling the kids at home, and not stressful for the students, because some of the students are they use technology very easily, and they sometimes find out information better than the teachers. So important part at this moment is to build the capacities of the teacher quickly. So we have been working with Athabasca University to offer a short course on introduction to technology-enabled learning. And we have recently started something called a blended learning practice Mooc. So these two Moocs have been running for last 5 years. But what we did to respond quickly, we thought, okay, let's do it again quickly. We were planning these Moocs to happen in the fall, but then we just started the introduction to technology-enabled learning Mooc as a response immediately. And you'll be happy to know that until yesterday, there were already 2,400 learners in that course. So each of these cohorts of Moocs that we offer gets something from 1,000 learners to go up to 4,500 learners. It probably some people say it's not huge Moocs, but the kind of impact these Moocs brings in real life is tremendous. Because what happens, we have done some studies on what happens to the teachers who go through the training. Not only they learn about some of the technologies through interaction in the communities, in the discussion forums, but also they get more interested towards discovery learning. So because they get exposed to different resources, they start looking at learning as a discovery, and that is something very interesting, and they become pressure point and ask and demand for technology on the ground to be available. And that's how things are changing in many places. The Punya rightly pointed out that local innovation, the teachers are now coming with their own local innovations. We expose them to different theoretical models, practical tools in these courses, and they start looking at their own practical solutions in the course. First they plan, and then those plans are validated by the teachers, and then they go and apply those things and experiment those innovations. So it's a range of things that are happening. The blended learning practice Mooc, the introduction to technology-enabled learning started on 5th of April, but the blended learning practice Mooc is going to start on 19th of April. That's a 4-week course. The previous one, which is introduction to technology-enabled learning, is a 5-week course. So
we missed that 19th of what?
April.
April, okay.
So those are the things which are coming up. But we have also short courses which are targeted to groups. Like we offer short courses on facilitating online learning or developing and teaching online. We have these small short courses which are given and offered on demand to countries and institutions when they ask for something like that. And I know you see this Mooc, a series of 12 webinar on massive open online courses coming up. It was actually targeted to a small institution, or rather a university in Malaysia, but now it is open to everyone. And we are getting interest from, we last week got an interest for those courses from Zimbabwe. which is currently not a Commonwealth country, but they are very much interested, and we are hoping large number of students will, teachers will come from those
Yeah.
Moocs.
Sanjaya, you actually wrote about it in the book that I have. Someone would like the chapter, and it's written with Nathaniel and Marty Cleveland Innes, who people might recognize Marty for the COL model. The people teaching these Moocs are really well known. And so I can just send me an email. I'd be happy to send that to you. And next month I'll be involved in that Mooc with my former doc student from Wayne State, Manaju, who's watching here. So the two of us will talk about our research on Moocs.
In fact, the teachers are from our Mooc, what we have observed, they are stars. And many of those Nathaniel and Marty, they get so many emails from our partners these days, or the participants these days, and they are great guys. They just love to respond to people and help people on the process.
So Athabasca is an open university, right? And we're about out of maybe a minute, because I've got a 5-minute wrap up, and we're at the 5 minutes. And one of the things I'm going to wrap up with, I want to explain to people what open universities are. They might not be aware of what they are. And PCF 9, which I met you in Scotland in September, was a 50-year anniversary of the Open U of the UK. How could people be involved in PCF 10 who are watching here? And so tell us a little bit about the open universities and
the Open Universities movement actually started with the establishment of UK Open University in '69. But distance teaching university, the first distance teaching university is University of South Africa, actually, 1948. As of now, in institutions which are dependent on technology-enabled teaching and learning as their primary modes of delivery, in the Commonwealth, there are 34 of them. That includes 3 virtual universities. This is and almost about 5 million learners study in these universities, and they're all accredited. They're all recognized institutions through which learners get their qualifications. So they use largely technology to deliver teaching and learning. Athabasca is one of the premier institutions of those group of institutions. The other one where I served about 17 years is Indira Gandhi National Open University. And so the PCF actually brought about 600 professionals from these institutions to Scotland, and we are people from about 60 countries participating in that. And we are now looking forward to the PCF 10, which will be announced very soon.
What's PCF stand for? Pan-Pacific?
Pan-Commonwealth Forum. We have completed 9 iterations. It's called Pan-Commonwealth Forum for Open Learning.
So we got a couple last announcements. We have 2 minutes left, and I want to thank everyone for participating this week. But we haven't mentioned a couple of things. They have a newsletter called Connections, right? You can subscribe to. Everyone could get. Tony runs a journal, and Sanjay the 2 of them run a journal called Journal of Learning for Development, which is open access. And thank you, Tony, for recently publishing something that Maina and I did. It's a great journal. Take a look at Journal of Learning for Development. They also have a blog. They have resources. They have a ton of ways in which you can get from as well as give to the community. You could be part of the Commonwealth. You could consider yourself a member by contributing to the Journal of Learning for Development. And you can get your research read by many people because it's open access. And you keep the copyright for things. So any last comments about the resources, Sanjay? We're at 6:28 here.
All the resources of Commonwealth of Learning are available under Creative Commons license attribution share alike. We have our repository, which is called Oasis, oasis.col.org. And it says huge amount of resources on teaching, learning, most research reports, conference papers, and I welcome everyone to.
So I actually have a suggestion. Would it be possible, Francis, Tony, and Sanjay, that you guys could write a short little blog post with some of these pictures and photographs that you shared, with links to these resources? Because, you know, this is an ephemeral medium. The chat vanishes, and when you say a hashtag, it's hard to click on that word when you say it. that would be wonderful. And we would love to host it on the Silver Linings website.
Yeah.
Again, don't make it a heavy thing to do, a quick, sort of a dump of your ideas, because you've already been thinking about it. A short little thing, that would be wonderful.
Tony?
You'll take the lead, Tony.
Tony, we should say yes, I think.
Of course.
All right, Tony, I will hound you. How's that?
You're welcome.
There you go. All right.
We're at 6:29 here, and I just want to be
Next
cognizant.
week.
Next week is Will Richardson, a famous K-12 educator, originally from Chicago. He has a book called Podcast Wikis and Blogs. Oh my, we're not in Kansas anymore, or something like that. Join us for episode 5 next week. But I want to thank Francis and Sanjaya and Tony for helping us out this week. Parting words, Tony or Francis? Any parting thoughts?
We need to rethink the way we do assessment in schooling as well.
The solutions lies within the local context. We have to make sure that we involve the local people in whatever plans we have to address COVID-19.
And I would say thank you for the opportunity for all of us to be here on.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for all the work that you do and sharing it with us. I think it was very inspirational and helpful to all our participants and the discussion that happened on the channel. This video will be, once YouTube takes care of it, I edit it a little bit, and then Zhao will post it up and it'll be on the website. So please feel free to share and do write for us. So Kurt, last words.
This has been great. It's just what I wanted, to have a chance to be back with my friends from the Commonwealth of Learning. And you definitely delighted. You did not disappoint. There are going to be people going to your website in droves now, or I hope so. So everyone, do take a look. And again, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart to have you involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Be safe.